encourage you to take a few minutes and read the rest of Shir Shirim, a song of love. Really erotic biblical poetry that the rabbis included out of a sense that it was a metaphor between God and of the loving relationship between God and the Jewish people. A good message for us to remember at this time of God's love for the Jewish people, of God's love in the world. We always need more of that. I want to just give over a short teaching this morning. I think my other teachings have been a little bit longer. But a short teaching this morning. Then, as before, we'll say our communal prayers, keeping in mind all those who need prayer at this moment. And we will finish up with the Musaf Amidah. First of all, for those of you before the teaching, I want to just take a moment to count the Omer. Hayom Shnei Yamim LaOmer. Today is 2 days of the Omer. We began counting the Omer on the night of our second Seder. I hope you had wonderful Seders. And as in years past, there is a Kabbalistic practice of assigning each of the weeks of the Omer a particular aspect of God, one of what's called the Sfirot, one of the emanations of God, and then each of the days of the Omer, an aspect of God. And so the first week of the Omer is the Sfira of Chesed, which means loving kindness, and the day two. So just as an example, day one was Chesed of Chesed, the loving kindness of loving kindness. And day two, the aspect that we think about on the second day of each week, is Gevurah, which is translated as strength, but really, in a sense, discipline. And I just want to read you a reflection from this wonderful resource, the spiritual guide to the counting of the Omer that I've enjoyed each year for many years. So today is Gevurah of Chesed, the discipline of loving kindness. Healthy love must always include an element of discipline and discernment. Healthy love means a degree of distance and respect for the other, an assessment of another's capacity to contain your love. Love must be tempered and directed properly. Ask a parent who in the name of love has spoiled his child, or someone who suffocates his or her spouse with love and doesn't allow the other any space of his or her own. Or perhaps ask that person whose spouse suffocates them and doesn't allow them any space of their own. Love with discretion is necessary to avoid giving to those who would use loving to perpetuate negative behavior. So it is a good thing for us to draw boundaries in our practice of loving kindness. Some questions for us to think about: is my love disciplined enough? Do others take advantage of my giving nature? Am I perhaps hurting others by becoming their crutch in the name of love? Am I hurting my children by forcing upon them my value system because I love them so? Do I respect the one I love, or is it a selfish love that I have? Am I sensitive to another person's feelings and attitudes? Do I see my loved ones, or instead do I see my loved ones as an extension of myself and my own needs? Do I take into account the capacity of my partner to receive love before I give it? And is my love given appropriately? There's a statement here: rain is a blessing, and we started to pray for tal, for dew instead of rain, on the first day of Passover. This says, rain is a blessing only because it falls in drops that don't flood the fields. So when we pray for rain, or for tal, we pray that it is a bracha and not a klala, that it's a blessing and not a curse. And this idea that rain, which is perhaps a manifestation of God's love in the world because it nourishes the world, but it is only so when it falls in drops that don't flood the fields. And we need to also be careful that in our love we are not overwhelming those who we love. And this gives an exercise: help others on their terms, not on yours. So apply yourself to their specific needs, even if it takes effort. A good exercise for us to keep in mind. So the reflection that I wanted to bring today is from the Haggadah, and I came across it in my study of the Kli Yakar, Rabbi Ephraim of Lunchitz, who points out something about the 4 children, and that I'd sort of noticed, but he has a beautiful, I had noticed this before, but he has a really beautiful explanation of what's going on. So he says, he points out that if you look at the wicked child, the Rasha, in the Haggadah it reads, Rasha Mahu Omer, what does the wicked child say? And then there's a quotation from the Torah, Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem, what is this service to you? And then there's the famous explanation of the Rasha's question, lachem velo lo. He is saying, what is this to you, right, but not to him. And in saying that, ulafisha hotziat atzmo min haklal kafar ba'ikar, that because the wicked one excludes him or herself from the community, from the majority, kafar ba'ikar, this is very strong language. He has sort of denied the essence of things, denied the Exodus, denied God, but denied sort of the essence of things. And so the first thing I want to say just about this is, of course, we don't want to categorize any particular person as being all one thing. I think the rabbis were very aware. They used these ideas of a wicked child, a wicked son, and a wise one, but I think they were using them as archetypes. I mean, even if they weren't, then we still can. To use them as archetypes. And I think it's a very powerful thing. We've studied this in some of my Hartman courses, to understand that the one of the worst things that we can do in the Jewish tradition is not some sort of is framed here as removing yourself from the community. That there's something very, very deeply Jewish and important in seeing yourself. When I study with people who are converting, I talk with them about throwing your lot in with the lot of the Jewish people in the world, throwing your destiny in with the Jewish people, and to say to yourself, that is something that affects other Jews but doesn't affect me, is deeply problematic. And on Pesach, I think part of why this Pesach was so difficult is because of the sense of isolation that we had, and we had to make that extra effort to sit down on Pesach night, and even if there was nobody else around the table with us, to know that we were celebrating the Pesach, and in doing so we were connecting ourselves with the experience of the Jewish people, not only all over the world, but with the experience of the Jewish people all throughout history, going back to the very first Pesach. The Kli Yakar, and you can find this in most Haggadot, points out that the question, Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem, what is the service to you, is a quotation from Exodus chapter 12, verse 26. And I just want to read you verses 24, 25, and 26. It says in verse 24, you shall observe this, meaning the Passover night, as an institution for all time, for you and your descendants, meaning what just happened on the actual night, what the rabbis call Pesach Mitzrayim, the Passover in Egypt is not only that, but actually is supposed to be reenacted for generations and generations. And it continues in verse 25, and V'haya ki tavo el ha'aretz asher yitein Adonai lachem, and when you come to the land that Adonai will give you, as God has promised, you shall observe this rite, ushmartem et ha'avodah hazot. You shall observe this rite. And then it continues, and when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? V'haya ki yomer malechem b'nechem. And then it's the quotation of the wicked son, ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. What is this service to you? Now, what's interesting, and the Kli Yakar points this out, is that verse 27 continues with an answer. Okay? V'amartem, when your child asks you, what is this rite that you're doing, Ve'amartem, you should say to that child, Zevach Pesachu la'Adonai. It is the Passover sacrifice to Adonai. Asher Pasach al Batei V'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim, because God passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt, B'Nokpo et Mitzrayim, when God smote the Egyptians, Ve'et Batenu Hitzil, and our houses God saved. This is, I guess, what Moshe is explaining to the people. And then when the people hear this, Vayikod ha'am vayishtachavu, the people then bowed low in homage. And the Kli Yakar asked a very basic question, which is, if the question, right, is a quotation from verse 26, then the answer that the Haggadah gives should be the answer in verse 27, but it's not. Okay, the Haggadah continues. I said this, that the wicked child has excluded himself from the essence, and you're supposed to blunt his teeth in some way, and say to him, in other words, be very frank with him and say, I don't think, God forbid, the Haggadah is advocating any sort of physical abuse, God forbid. But it says, then there's another quotation, say to that child, Ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim. For you are to say, on account of this that God did for me when I left Egypt. And that is a quotation, not from verse 27 right after, but you actually have to turn all the way forward to chapter 13, verse 8, where again the Exodus is described. And when we are reading about how in verse 7, throughout the 7 days unleavened bread shall be eaten, no leavened bread shall be found with you, no leaven shall be found in all your territory, and you shall explain to your son on that day, on behalf of this, because of this, of what God did for me when I left Egypt. So the quotation, the answer that's given to the wicked child, number one, comes from a verse that instead of the one right after it, it comes from a chapter later, chapter 13, verse 8. And the Kli Yakar also notes that for the child who doesn't know how to ask, v'she'eno yodeh lishol, at petachlo, you're supposed to begin telling the story, and then it says, shene'emar, v'higarata levincha, bayom ahu lemor, say to your child on that day, ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim, because of this God did for me when I went out of Egypt, which is the same exact verse. So the same answer is not only the same answer, but the same verse is used for the wicked child and the child who doesn't know how to ask, when there's a perfectly good answer, first of all, in the verse that comes right after the question from the wicked child, and second of all, the rabbis also don't like to typically use the same verse for two different things. And the Kli Yakar has, I thought, a beautiful answer, a beautiful explanation of this that I'm not going to read you, but I'm going to see if I can just explain it. He says that when a child, v'she'eno yodeh lishol, The child doesn't know how to ask. When a child is quiet, you don't know why they are quiet. Okay? He says very beautifully, this prophecy of what it is that's in a child's mind is not revealed to us. And I would just like to say as a parent that the Kli Yakar, what is so beautiful about this teaching is that he has truly entered into the experience of not only parents with children, although clearly parents with children, but the truth is he's entered into the experience of every single one of us. We can never know. We can try to walk a mile in someone's shoes. We can try to empathize, but we can never fully sympathize. We can never fully understand what it is that another person is experiencing, and we can never fully know what is going on in a person's silence. So the Kli Yakar says that when you as the parent are teaching your child at the Seder table, you actually, I don't know if he did this at the Seder table literally, but my sense is he sort of imagines that what you're doing is you're saying this verse, Ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeti mimitzrayim, that what you say to your child is, it's because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. And when you just say those words, he has a beautiful thing. He says that in verse 8, it begins, V'higadata levincha. Higadata means tell it to your child, but that is the word Haggadah, right? Agadah, the telling, which he says is different than speaking. Often in the Bible, speaking can be harsh words. So the rebuke that God gives to the Jewish people always comes on Parsha Divarim, because the rabbis understood Divarim to be harsh words, and Amirot, sayings, were understood often to be sort of rach, soft, gentle words. And Agadata, he says, the beauty of Agadah is that it can mean both ways. And we know this, by the way, about Agadah, that the rabbis had a sense that Agadah was really, really important in addition to halakha. Halakha is the black and white, but the Agadah is the stories. And the stories is the richness of everyday life that can't quite be nailed down. In Robert Cover's terms, it's the law, the nomos and narrative. It's the narrative that's the setting for law. So he says, V'higadata levincha, use Agadah. Use Agadah when you say to your child, and what he means by that, according to the Kli Yakar, is just say this sentence, Ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeti mimitzrayim. It's on behalf of this that God did for me when I left Egypt. And the child may just be quiet and hear those as inviting words, right? What God did, when the parent says it's for what God did for me, the child says, my parent is saying this, so yes, that must have been done for me too. I'm invited into this story, right? And so there's plenty of room for the silence of the child who just doesn't know how to ask. But also for the wicked child, you don't have to, the wicked child will hear the word li, what God did for me, right? And because of where that child is coming from, in their silence, you don't even have to say it, but they will say to themselves, leave low, or they will say, it's what God did for you, but not for me, right? They will exclude themselves. But the parent doesn't need to say that for the child. The parent just leaves it open. And I think that there's something just very important. I want to say I want to connect this with one last teaching this is from the Breslov Haggadah about the wise child. Okay, and the wise child, it says, Chacham mahu omer. The wise child, what does the wise child say? And the Hasidic way of reading that is not the wise child, what does the wise child say, but the wise child. How do we define wisdom? Wisdom is defined as asking the question, Mahu Omer? What is he saying? And according to this, wisdom is defined as listening. It's listening for the questions, listening for the doubts, listening for wherever the child is. And I think we're given this paradigm of the 4 children because the essence of Pesach is to relate the story in a way that meets each person, each child within us where we are. Right? So the Haggadah goes on, learn to listen, learn to hear, learn to feel and relate. When others talk, the wise one doesn't apply preconceived notions. The wise one listens. When others speak, the wise one doesn't classify and judge. The wise one hears, listens to hear the underlying message being conveyed so that we can help those in need. We can assist those who are lacking. And we also have to learn, if we cultivate wisdom, the wise child within us, we have to learn to hear ourselves, to hear our true inner voices, to listen to the silent speech, the incessant thoughts of our minds. Ma hu omer, right? What is, what is truly being said in this moment? I've said in previous weeks that the most important thing we can do as a community during this time, my teacher Dani Segel spoke about this at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, is we can begin any teaching, etc., by just calling and checking in on people. It's not only about content, it's just calling and seeing how are you doing. So I want to give us a kavanah, a task, when Shabbos is over during Chol HaMoed, call some people you know and who you love, and also call some people in the congregation, call some people in the community who you don't know very well, and just say, we are organizing this. I want you to know, as a staff and as a synagogue, we're trying to organize everybody calling each other. But don't wait for us to call you. Reach out and call. And when you speak with someone, either a stranger or someone who you know, try to just put out there an agadah, a statement that truly invites them to speak and that cultivates within us a sense of wisdom, of truly trying to hear what is being said. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. And may that true sense of listening bring a sense of redemption in the world. We are going to continue with a Misha Berach for Cholim, with a prayer for those who are ill in our community. If you have a name that you'd like to include, I'm going to read the names on our communal list. I'll then pause. I invite you to say that person's name out loud at home, in Hebrew or in English, and if you feel comfortable in your relationship to them. Misha Berach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Ve'imotenu Sar Rivka Rechav Eliyahu Yivarech V'Yarpet HaCholim. Ad Ada bat Natan u'Miriam, Eliza Chana bat Leah, Abigail bat Avraham v'Sarah, Azriel ben Liora, Avram Dov ben Fruma, Baruch Menachem ben Yaakov, Udvora, Chaim Reuven ben Moshe Eliyahu, Chana bat ben Zion HaKohen v'Itka, Chana bat Malka, Chava bat Rachel, Chavaliba bat Chana v'Shlomo, Chai Rivka bat Miriam Tova, David ben Elia, David ben Sarah, David Yosef ben Avraham v'Chana, Eliza Esther Gittel bat Chavaliba v'Chaim David mebeit Levi, Leah Fega Malka bat Ida Mechor Eshel bat Esther Tzivia, Mimitziro bat Sarah Fega, Miriam bat Batya, Miriam bat Rachel, Miriam Ita bat Wolf HaLevi v'Alta HaKohen, Mishulamit bat Maryam, Moshe Yosef ben Vishkaelka, Penina bat Sarah v'Avraham, Sarah Batya bat Rachel, Sarah bat Hinda, Sarah Gittel bat Ruth, Shira Batya bat Merav, Shmuel Aryeh ben Avraham, Bitzalod v'Karet, Shmuel ben Shoshana, Shprinza bat Brenya, Tuvia ben Shmuel v'Tzipora, Tzur ben Yaakov HaLevi v'Shendel, Yehoshua Yitzchak ben Yaakov v'Sarah, Neil Abramson, Acacia Alder, Caitlin Basham, James Bloodworth, Netta Boswell, Susan Bright, Teresa Cunnington, Liz Emmett, Ezra Poor, Michael Ray, Jack Reish, Patty Pate Reynolds, Joyce Rum, Helen Rosenberg, Richard Roth, Annie Solomon, Karen Spidell, Ann Stuntz, Sherry Zweig. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yemalei Rachamim Alehem Lachzikam Urapotam V'Yishlach Lehem Me'erav Refuah Shlema L'chol Evreihem V'Gidehem B'toch Shar Cholei Yisrael Refuah HaNefesh Refuah HaGuf V'Nomar Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal all those who suffer from illness, from physical, spiritual, and emotional distress, from illness both acute and chronic. May the one of blessing and mercy strengthen and heal them, and soon grant them and others in our community who are ill a healing of body and a healing of spirit. And let us say, Amen. I'll also recite a Misha Berach for caregivers, not only for our community, but for our country and in the world, doctors, therapists, nurse aides, working each day to repair injury, to cure disease, to alleviate pain, attending to those who are close to death, a prayer for our grocery store workers, truck drivers, for all those who are putting themselves at risk, and in doing so helping to keep our society moving and keep all of us healthy by maintaining this physical distancing, which is so key for our country and the world at this moment. Mishiberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak Yaakov Imotenu Sarif Kavrechav Aliyah Uyevarech Ekol She'oskim B'Rufuat Cholim V'chol Shemivaklim Otam V'chol She'oskim B'Tzorchei HaTzibur Be'emunah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishalem Scharam Yiten Lahem Chochma Havana Koach V'Lev Shomea La'asok Ba'avodatam Be'emunah V'Yishlach Bracha V'Hatzlacha B'chol Ma'aseh Yedeihem Im Kol Yisrachel Ahem V'Nomar Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless all who engage in acts of healing, who visit the sick, and who engage in the needs of our community and our world. May the Holy One justly reward them and bless them with wisdom and understanding, strength and openness as they faithfully engage in their tasks. May God bless the works of their hands to be successful along with all those in the world who do righteousness. And let us say, Amen. A prayer for all of us during this pandemic. May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no options. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those who have no safe place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin at all. May we who have settled in for a quarantine at home remember those who have no home. As fear grips our country, let us choose love. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbors. And let us say, Amen.